We're going to turn now to the discussion of aggression, antisocial behavior, as well as talk a bit about the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of altruism and pro-social behavior. Much of the research on social relationships has to do with aggression, and aggression itself involves behaviors that are intended to hurt others. According to an old theory called the frustration-aggression hypothesis, it's believed that aggression is always the product of frustration, and frustration basically always leads to aggression. If you think about this, the analysis or the conclusion that this theory came to cannot really always be true, because sometimes I get frustrated just because, or rather when I get frustrated, I get upset. Maybe I get sad. I don't necessarily get aggressive every time I'm frustrated. Nonetheless, this research opened up the door into investigating a lot about aggression and taught us a lot about things such as hostile aggression, which is a form of aggression which intends to cause pain unto others, as opposed to instrumental aggression, which is intended to achieve a goal. So not all aggression is the same. Not all aggression has the same intention behind it. And the differences between these two types of aggression do differentiate in terms of the outcome, and also have differentiations in terms of the effect on the aggressor and the aggressee. We also know that testosterone plays a very important role when it comes to aggression. So testosterone is a hormone that it's located both in men and in women, but it's normally much higher in men than in women. What we also know about testosterone is that it appears to lower the threshold for aggression, meaning if I have higher levels of testosterone, the bar of what it will take to tip me off into an aggressive state is lower, right? It's a lower threshold, so that more testosterone equals more aggression. People and animals, we're not just talking about people, but even animals who have these high levels of testosterone are more easily provoked, and therefore are more likely to engage in aggressive behaviors. The presence of aggression and aggressive cues, such as the presence of guns, knives, or even the presence of black clothing, can lead people to higher levels of aggression, specifically among those people who have already been provoked, or who have a predisposition towards being provoked. This phenomenon is called the weapon effect, or the weapons effect. Aggression also can be learned. It's not just something that we see being a reaction to one's environment, but it is something that can be taught by others, as we know from the social learning theory and the work of Albert Bandura, which we've talked about in previous chapters. Children who observed the aggressive behavior of adults in a two-way mirror in a room with a lot of toys would then go into that toy room themselves, meaning the children would go into the toy room that the adults were in being very aggressive, and the children would act very aggressively. What children see, children will do. They learn from the models that they see. And we know this is proven, or rather supported in research, and also, of course, anecdotally, we see this as well. There's research about video games and violent video games, and whether those have an effect on increasing the potential for violence or aggression. So there is a lot of research in this particular domain. We know about research into antisocial behavior that individuals who engage in antisocial behavior have the potential for low levels of remorse, They don't care for other people's feelings. They are very easily angered and hostile, and their affect or their emotion is expressed through these types of aggressive acts. We already spoke about the antisocial personality disorder in the chapter on psychological disorders when we spoke about personality disorders. And these are the traits that we often see in those with antisocial personality disorder. And while there is a predisposition towards these behaviors, we also know that from social learning theory, these elements of acting and behaving can be learned. Now, what about the opposite end of the spectrum? What about acting kindly and nicely to people? Is that something that can be learned? Is that something that we have innately? So there has been quite an influx in research over the past 20 years in the positive psychology realm about altruism and about helping behaviors. We know about altruism, which is this basic lack of unselfishly helping others without expecting something in return. We know that this type of altruistic behavior is possible, and we know that unfortunately people may not always step up into their role of being altruistic, specifically when many other people are around you. So when there's a dangerous situation that arises and there's 25 other people or hundreds of other people, you might shrink back and say, someone else will do it. And you may fall into what's called the bystander effect. We know about this phenomenon of the bystander effect from an unfortunate murder that happened here in New York City, to a woman named Kitty Genovese in 1964. In 1964, this woman was assaulted in her apartment complex, and she had yelled out for help repeatedly on 3 different occasions as her attacker approached her and then ran away and then approached her again. And despite the fact that over 38 people heard the screams as reported by the police later on, none of them allegedly made a phone call to the police. And unfortunately, the woman was killed, and no one acted in an altruistic manner to try to help this woman due to this bystander effect. We know that altruism is something that can be inspired by having smaller groups of people around. We know that once the first person steps up to help, more people do step up to help. And according to the social exchange theory, our goal in life is to maximize our rewards and to minimize the costs of our actions. So if helping someone will benefit that other person and not actually get me in trouble, then I'm more likely to step up and try to engage in that activity. So that about covers it for this particular chapter on, or rather this subtopic on, from social psychology, and we'll wait and see what we have next in store.